They're not chains that bind us, but they're something that allow us to have real, abiding freedom. These are not rules that are given to you by a mean, uncaring emperor. These are not rules that are given to you by a king that desires your destruction. But rather, these 10 commandments are rules that will help us to do what is good and help us to have a better life. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, we read, "The Lord commanded us to do all of these statutes, to fear the Lord our God for our good always, that he might preserve us alive as we are to this day." Whenever the Lord commands you to do something, whenever he gives you a rule for life, it is for your good always, that he may preserve you alive. And so we need to distinguish something today. We need to understand that there is a false kind of freedom, and then there is a true kind of freedom. And you have to get this right if you're going to understand how beneficial the 10 Commandments can be in your life. Here is one definition of freedom. And this is the most popular definition of freedom in the entire world. This definition says that freedom is the ability to do whatever you want. How many people would disagree with that notion of freedom? Well, there's one, two. We all should. Yeah. The other definition of freedom is this. Freedom is the ability to do what you should. There's one notion of freedom that says freedom is the ability to do what you want. There's another notion of freedom that says freedom is the ability to do what you should. What I want you to understand today, what I want you to understand is that the Bible teaches that freedom is the ability to do what you should, not the ability to do what you want. And you first see that lesson in the first lesson in the Bible. You see it in Genesis, in the passage that we looked at a couple of weeks ago. The lie about freedom began in the Garden of Eden. When the serpent was tempting Adam and Eve, when Satan was coming before them and he was saying, "Don't you want to eat some of this forbidden fruit?" What he is saying is this: you need to exercise your freedom to do what you want in order to receive power and in order to get what you want. And so his emphasis in freedom was telling Adam and Eve that they need to do what they want. But they had much greater freedom prior to having met Satan. They were free to eat from any tree in the garden except for the one. And that freedom involved them doing what they should according to God's commands. They didn't really find freedom in eating. Jesus says quite a bit later on in history, "Truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin." John chapter 8, verse 34. If you commit sin, you are a slave to sin. When I was in the Philippines, I remember seeing an ox that was there beside the road, and this ox had a ring in its nose like this. It was a ring about this big. And the farmer could take that ring and he could make the ox go wherever he wanted the ox to go. And that's the picture of slavery that is there in the Bible concerning sin. Sin is something that makes us do what we should not do. It leads us around where we don't necessarily want to go, into places that are not necessarily good for us. And before you knew Jesus Christ, sin had you like this. Sin had you with a ring in your nose, and it was leading you around wherever it wanted you to go. You thought that you were free because you were doing a lot of the things you wanted to do, but ultimately sin was telling you what to do, and this freedom that you thought you had was a false freedom. There are many people prior to knowing Jesus Christ that were led around by alcohol. They were led around by They thought that they were expressing their freedom to do what they want by getting drunk. But before long, that alcohol had such a control over their lives that it led them around so that they had to have a drink all the time. That's what alcoholism does. There are a lot of people that found pleasure in sex outside of marriage. And they thought that they were doing exactly what they wanted to be doing, but nonetheless, it was this desire that was insatiable inside them that was leading them around wherever they wanted to go. When you seek for pleasure outside of God and outside of the limits that He has imposed, you're always going to need more pleasure in order to make yourself happy. You're never going to be able to fill up a void inside your life. You're never going to be able to find real fulfillment and happiness when you are disobedient. That is what sin does. And even if you try to fill up the void in your life with legitimate things, that is still a situation in which sin can hold on to your life. If you try to find real satisfaction in life and real fulfillment in life from your hobby, then you're never going to find it. If you're going to try to find satisfaction in your work, in your relationships, or any of these things that are perfectly legitimate, but nonetheless you try to do that apart from a love for God, then you're never going to find what you're looking for. And sin is going to continue to lead you around, continue to hold you in bondage. And so what looks like freedom, what looks like, when it looks like you're doing exactly what you want, you're still not going to find happiness, and you're still going to be captured by sin. But through Christ, you're able to be set free from illegitimate desires. You're able to find happiness and joy and contentment in the only one that can really give you these things. And then you end up with a happiness that is not dependent so much on other people. And that's the sort of freedom that can only be found in Jesus Christ. Romans chapter 6 says, "We know that our old self was crucified with Him in order that the body of sin might be brought to nothing, so that we would no longer be enslaved to sin." Do you want to know how to be free? Do you want to know how to have real contentment? It is only found in Jesus Christ. He is the one who gives us freedom to do the things that we are created to do. He is the one who is able to give us purpose. And the Ten Commandments are related to all of this. If you have found grace in Jesus Christ, if you have found salvation in Jesus Christ, then why on earth would you want to go back into slavery? If the chains have been broken from your wrist and you have been set free, why would you ever want to go back? Well, the Ten Commandments help us here. The Ten Commandments help us to understand what is right and what is wrong, and help us to avoid being enslaved again, even for a moment. The Ten Commandments are something that are a blessing to God's church. God told the people of Israel, "Be holy, for I am holy." They were to be a nation that was separate from the people of Egypt. They were to be separate in the way that they acted. They were to be a people that was separate from the Canaanites. They were to be separate in the way that they acted. They were to be holy. It was very important that they be a holy nation so that they would be able to show forth the glories of Him who had called them into His marvelous light. In the very same way, and even to a greater degree, you are called to be holy as Christians. You also should be lights to the world around you. You should live lives that are separate. When you think about the Ten Commandments, what is your attitude towards them? Everyone here is aware that we're going through the Ten Commandments one by one. We'll start on Commandment 1 next week. Is that something that you dread? Or is that something that you really look forward to? You should look forward to it. These laws are given for your freedom. These laws are given so that you might have a happier, more fulfilling life. They are not laws that are intended to enslave you, but rather they are a declaration of freedom. You need to look forward to it. You need to start praying right now that God would point out ways in your life that you need to change. so that you would be happier, and to live a life that others will see so that